A year-end review of significant changes released at the end of December 2025, and a forecast on the future direction of Canada's immigration program on this edition of Impulse.
Hi, I'm Howard Greenberg.
Hi, I'm Naumaan Hameed.
Well, Happy New Year, Naumaan, 2026. And immigration is up for grabs, I guess.
That's one way to describe it.
Okay, so maybe we can discuss with our audience what we think is happening and what we think is going to happen.
Well, you would think at the end of the year that we'd be entitled after a busy year to relax. But I think on December 19th, we all had a little bit of an awakening as we saw new regulations published with very little advance notice other than speculation and fairly significant changes that were introduced on December 19th.
Well, whenever they're introducing changes that restrict rights and cut down on the program and put people in jeopardy, it's not a good end to a year.
Right.
Well, what do we see coming up for this year? Do we see that these regulations have basically put a stop to the startup visa program?
So maybe just a few summary points about the instructions that came out. The first change was no new certificates could be issued by designated entities as of the end of the year. Meaning if you received a certificate on December 31st, you have to file that application within 6 months, but we're not going to see any more certificates. This is suggested to be a temporary pause, but we also see in the instructions and in the discussion that there may be a new program coming in. But that was the first significant news. We wondered how they're going to deal with the backlog. No new certificates on the front end. They also introduced a new priority system. So somewhat surprising that if you're an investment-based case, meaning that you received money from an angel, a VC, or even the tech network, or money from an entity, and you received at least one member of the team as a work permit, those individuals are now deemed to be priority one. Priority two are those individuals that have an investment-based SUV certificate, but may not have received a work permit. And number three is everyone else.
Right.
And to make things more interesting, no more work permits effective December 19th, 2025.
Wow. So you've authorized the issuance of certificates up until January 1st, which permit applications to be filed under those certificates for individuals who might be noted to be essential in those certificates, and yet you're denying them a work permit to come to Canada to set up the business.
And in that certificate and in that business plan that may have already been submitted for PR, it was premised on the fact that these essential workers needed to be in Canada quickly to drive this business.
Something tells me that this is not the end of that story,
Right.
that we can expect a little bit of an uprising of sorts, I would think, and maybe some intervention by the courts. That story is yet to be told.
Right.
Okay. And now that's a good lead in to the growth of the provincial nominee programs. We know in Ontario, new streams are being contemplated.
Right.
And in 2 phases. And do you want to talk a little bit about what we can expect there?
Yeah, so the consultation period is over now. So they've received feedback. The program will have a number of different features that we haven't seen before. They'll revive the entrepreneur program. We don't know the criteria. Hopefully they'll learn a little bit from their experience with the succession interest plan, but it appears that it would be for those businesses that are creating a net new business or potentially buying a Canadian business where that owner may be retiring. Also a global talent stream where they're looking at academics, they're looking at individuals who've done significant work in STEM or innovation, individuals potentially in Canada running a business on an open work permit. So some new possibilities there. And they're going to reconstruct and simplify the employer-based streams by NOC code. And hopefully, there are many, in the current program, there's sort of numerous streams they're trying to simplify, and that may create some new pathways for individuals. And I think one of the focus areas is particularly invitations in those occupations in demand, healthcare, trades, things that are critical to Ontario.
So we can predict that there'll probably be more subscription, more people applying than positions open, and some kind of hierarchy will have to be created.
Right.
As in any program, that on day one is the beginning of the backlogs.
Yes.
There's only so many certificates by each provincial authority, and the subscriptions will be high in British Columbia, in Ontario, as well in Alberta.
Right.
Okay.
Well, again, the provincial programs too have a high degree of compliance. Legislation has been introduced in Ontario too. There has been auditing, we've seen. In fact, we've pulled back on certain applications where they thought there were integrity issues. And when the system is tight, when there's limited spots, there is often, some degree of desperation for applicants to try to fit into programs. It's
Right.
very important, whether you're an employer sponsoring an employee or you're an employee trying to be eligible in a stream, to make sure you understand all of the enhanced compliance requirements so you're not disappointed at the end of that.
Well, 2026 is going to be an interesting year. You've got one population of applicants out there fighting to get in, and you've got another population of applicants who are in Canada fighting to stay in and not have to leave.
Right.
And deportations are up considerably in Canada as people are removed who don't leave voluntarily.
Right. And you're talking about individuals, but this has a direct impact on employers.
Right.
The systems become tighter. And we've seen some new announcements. The Employment Standards Act
Of Ontario.
of Ontario has been introduced, which talks about obligations when you're advertising for a job.
Right.
Talks about the fact that you cannot leverage Canadian work experience.
Right.
You have to explain whether the job is filled or vacant. You have to have more disclosure about wage and wage ranges. And this becomes very relevant if you're applying for a labor market impact assessment. There's already obligations, but these are enhanced obligations in Ontario. And I think what you're going to find, and we've seen this too, that officers are drilling down, really looking at a more invasive review of what you've done as an employer, what your recruitment efforts have been. In fact, the ESGC officer can see who's applied to the job now. So there's more enhanced reviews. So again, I think as an employer, we're in a tough economy right now.
Right.
And so when you make an application, particularly when you're challenging the labor market, you have to be very careful and thoughtful about how you approach that. Make sure your policies are consistent with your advertising. Your recruiters understand what their obligations are to ensure that you're meeting all of the new requirements of the programs.
So Canada is still open for business. It's still open for foreign workers, but in a very, very sophisticated and strategic way, employers have to make applications which are real, which can be substantiated, and which will hold up to scrutiny on a review.
Right, and strategy is critical. Trying to avoid, where possible, some of those more onerous programs, understanding all the tools available, the different categories, using the appropriate categories, and then making sure you've got a policy that's appropriate and that there's stakeholder support for immigration within your practice.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in conclusion, Greenberg Hameed is here to help. We'll help you set up your application. We'll help you fine-tune your qualifications and attributes to shape them to be more competitive in the selection market. We can help you with your business setup and in meeting provincial requirements, the checklist approach and beyond, hitting the ground running. And we can help you with refusals and addressing any issues you have with respect to fairness letters, which are challenging the information which you provided in your application. So please feel free to reach out. 2026 is the year that we are intent on getting closer to our clients, talking to them much more often. Communication is important, especially when the information flowing from the government is not that rich in information.
Right, absolutely.